Greetings, fellow Mist Wanderers. My name is Steve Morgan, and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. Apologies for my slow output recently. If you saw my recent post, I've been suffering from a cold, flu, chest infection type thing that's gone on for weeks. It's hard to make videos when you're constantly coughing and struggling to talk and have a sore throat, so that's why there's been fewer videos recently. It's not just affecting my videos as well. I've not run a D&D session for weeks as well, which is a major bummer. The reason I'm saying all this is because my next few videos are likely to be short ones to try and get me sort of back into the rhythm of things, easier and quicker to record, easier and quicker to edit, and so on. So, for example, the alternative Fated Allies and Curse of Strahd video I've kind of teased a few times. I'll do the banner that I've got at the moment so you can kind of get a glimpse as to who's there. That's probably going to be a couple more weeks away yet. For a while now, I've wanted to do some videos to kind of look at DMsGuild content that's specific to Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft, and kind of not just as an overview of them, but maybe I suggest some tweaks or some things that you might want to consider as well. I have plans to cover things like the interactive Tome of Strahd, the Real Housewives of Ravenloft. I'm not sure about the wedding at Ravenloft, just because I know Ginny D did a really good video on that, and some Ravenloft ones as well. So if you want to see those in the future, please subscribe if you haven't already. And I wanted to start with one that's quite important to me. I appreciate it might not be relevant to everyone, but I have kids who are just about approaching the official minimum D&D age, which apparently is 12 and up. So the very first one I wanted to cover is called Strahd Gives Me Goosebumps. And there's also I discovered while preparing this video, a Ravenloft Gives Me Goosebumps book version as well by Thomas Kolar. I got quite a lot of notes on this one, so I'm going to be looking at my screen over here, so apologies if my eyes keep wandering over here. Strahd Gives Me Goosebumps is, the idea of it is to tone down Curse of Strahd for younger players, ideally the age 8 and 10. That's ideal for me, because my kids at the moment are 10, nearly 11, and 8.5. We've been doing Hero Kids, which is available on Drive-Thru RPG, for a while now, and that's been pretty good. It's not D&D, but it's similar, and it's a simplified rules system. But we haven't done D&D properly. That's a lie, actually. We just started doing Lost Mine of Fandelver. I'll talk more about that at the end of the video. We did a one-off homebrewed one-shot. And I've also got the Adventure Begins board game as well, and we played that a couple of times. That's 10 plus. So I've been considering doing this, running Curse of Strahd for ages 8 to 12. I'll give a sort of quick overview of the whole thing. I don't want to say too much, because then obviously you might not, feel like you need to get it. So I'm not going to literally read it out verbatim or anything like that. But I'll give kind of the highlights and what it includes. So the credentials, the author's wife is a children's book author working on young adult and middle grade horror. Middle grade, I believe, is like age 8 to 12. So ideal. The introduction talks about different types of tolerances, have a nope button. I think that's pretty standard even for grown-ups playing D&D, the sort of, if this is too much, let us know and we can just stop it kind of thing. But more important for kids especially. Talks about the different kinds of horror. So you've got your Scooby-Doo horror, where it's kind of a bit like hijinks and wacky and, slightly mildly spooky. And then you get to things like Coraline as well, which is pretty heavier. My kids haven't watched Coraline, but they have watched Nightmare Before Christmas, so they've kind of watched content leaning that way. There's middle grade rules of thumb for writing that apply to DMing as well, such as no one dies, like properly truly dies. People can be saved and redeemed, things like that. There's DM observations for younger players. A few examples include giving, if there's a roll that fails, give them a second chance, but at a price. I mean, a lot of people do this for if it's sleight of hand opening a locked door and it fails, you can try again, but the risk is that it takes longer and things like that. And another thing I thought was cool was keeping 0 hit points vague. So, don't talk in graphic detail. If you slay the monster, you chop his head off, blah, blah, blah. You can just say something like, the monster is defeated, there's 0 hit points. And, treat it like in certain video games where the body just disappears, rather than it being kind of like, there's a corpse there now. It moves on to giving modification advice to Curse of Strahd as a whole. It talks about vampires and how, the sort of tolerance that kids like vampires and how it can be quite a heavy subject. Making sure that there are clear quest givers in the story as well, so that kids don't get sort of like lost and confused and thinking what to do next. I think this is generally good D&D advice anyway, but there's no harm in sort of reminding your players, whether they're adults or kids, like who's giving them proper quests and all that. And then what I really like about it is it goes chapter by chapter, talking about modifications and what you should consider changing. And the two big ones, and these are no surprises, are Dream Pastries, the Village of Barovia / the Old Bone Grinder, and the Werewolf Den, because they involve children. But it did contain a lot of advice for places I hadn't considered. A really good example of this is Krezk. So not only have you got the son who's revived, brought back from the dead. But you've got the abbot as a whole. It's kind of weird, the whole fallen angel thing, you know, can he be redeemed? And then obviously the mongrel folk of the Bellevues. Some kids might find that really cool, like Frankenstein monsters kind of thing, but some kids might find that pretty heavy. One tip it gives is consider shorter adventures. Curse of Strahd, as we all know, is quite a long one. But even like just something that's, you know, within one session or just a couple of sessions type thing. An example could be Strahd Must Die Tonight. For those of you who don't know, this is essentially Curse of Strahd condensed down to just Castle Ravenloft, and it can be run as a one-shot. People do it at things like Halloween. Of course, with the advice we just had a minute ago, which is don't talk too much about death, maybe don't call it Strahd Must Die Tonight. Maybe Strahd Must Be Defeated Tonight. Strahd Must Be Stopped Tonight. Strahd Must Cry Tonight, if you want to rhyme, but nah, maybe not. The added bonus of doing something as simple as just doing the castle and Strahd Must Die Tonight is that the castle is mostly fine to run as is, according to this resource. I would probably argue maybe the dungeons and torture area need to be maybe toned down, but, you know, leave that up to you. It's a good resource. It contained more than I expected. It was all very thoughtfully put, and I think at 99 cents, just under $1, it's an absolute bargain. I also found out while preparing this video there's Ravenloft Gives Me Goosebumps, which came after Strahd Gives Me Goosebumps, I believe, and kind of talks about Ravenloft as a whole and kind of looks more at Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft for people who maybe aren't doing Curse of Strahd and doing different types of horror and considering running it for 8 to 12-year-olds. I'll give a quick overview of that as well. It talks about the different genres of horror, such as body horror, as it touches upon in the book, Van Richten's Guide. It does a good job of citing examples and comparisons, such as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Eerie, Indiana, Gravity Falls, Are You Afraid of the Dark, and so on. Stuff that, you know, I grew up with some of those, and, you know, it's good to have something comparable as a grown-up. There's a section titled Famous Young Reader Horror Adapted to D&D Adventures. Young reader horror that adults of a certain age are likely to remember from their own childhood, such as Hocus Pocus, Paranorman, things like that, how to adapt those to a D&D adventure or one-shot. Recommended reading, more recent young reader horror novels, so that obviously, because, you know, we might be a bit out of touch with what's out there these days that kids might like, and what genres they are as well. So it gives a few examples and it ties into the genres mentioned in Van Richten's Guide. So for example, if you wanted to run like a dark fantasy one-shot and homebrew it yourself and make your own, there's a few novels there labelled dark fantasy that you can consider having a look at for ideas, inspiration, and so on, or maybe for your kid to read, and if they like it, you can adapt it accordingly. That's also just under $1, and you can buy them as a bundle and save a grand total of 50 cents, which is amazing. I found out after having bought the one and then bought the other, I think I still managed to get some sort of discount. I'll include links to both of them and the bundle in the description of this video. And as an added bonus, I'd like to mention that Tom, the author, and his wife Rachel have a Ravenloft podcast called The Wonderful World of Darklords, where they essentially convert Disney movies into Ravenloft Domains of Dread. I'll be honest, I've not listened to it, but I think the concept is really cool, and I'm going to try and check out a few episodes soon. The plan with my kids, so my oldest is nearly 11, we've actually just started in the last few days Lost Mine of Phandelver. So I did lie in the intro of the video saying I'm not DM'd much. I have DM'd just for my kid a little bit, but I'm not DM'd for my actual group that I run Ravenloft for. We just started Lost Mine of Phandelver, and as a mini intro to see if you liked it, I did Sacrifice of Innocence, which is Matt Colville's Thelian Tomb adapted as a sort of Lost Mine of Phandelver prequel, as a one-shot. There is supposed to be a kid who's captured by goblins to be sacrificed. I changed that to an adult because I thought a kid would be too heavy. And my youngest, who's 8.5, jumps in when he feels like it with a drop-in, drop-out PC as well. And then when he's not in the mood to play, I play that as well as a sidekick. To be honest, I'll probably save Curse of Strahd for when they're a little bit older, when they're at least probably 12. My youngest is quite sensitive, whereas my oldest is kind of more, you know, things don't really bother him so much. Maybe run it for the older kid when he's at least 12, with a few tweaks and modifications, and maybe run it for the younger one when he's a fair bit older, I think. The biggest problem I have is that they get restless and bored fairly easily. I remember playing the Adventure Begins board game, which, as I mentioned earlier, is 10 plus, and a quarter of the way through they were like, let's do something else now, and I'm like, ugh. But if I do Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft, I can look back on Strahd Gives Me Goosebumps, Ravenloft Gives Me Goosebumps, and I know that they will help me. And if I ever plan to run a one-shot, let's say Dark Fantasy, for example, I can reread that part of Ravenloft Gives Me Goosebumps, and I know that it'll help me out. And that's it for this one. Upcoming videos. As I mentioned earlier, I'm probably going to put the Alternative Fated Allies video on hold. That's probably going to take half an hour. This video, as I record it, I think I'm going to be recording for about 10 minutes, and I'm already struggling. So I'm going to wait a few more weeks until I tackle longer videos. With that in mind, I had a sort of small love letter to Ravenloft video planned called Ravenloft Has It All. I did this as a Ravenloft subreddit post a while back where I talk about how there's so much variety in Ravenloft despite it having the sort of Darklord's domain of dread, rinse repeat cycle of you got to defeat the Darklord in order to escape the mists, escape the domain. But I think there's a lot within that, and I just kind of wanted to turn that into a quick video as well. That'll probably only be like a short one, I think. And I can already feel my throat going, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you, Mr. Wanderers.